Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed all the modules so far. This is module 4 of When the Past Feels Like It's Still Happening. And in this module, we'll be talking about healing options that go beyond your own basic coping strategies. So I hope you enjoy it. So this goes over therapeutic options and creating your personalized path to recovery. So you've had a little chance to think about your traumatic history and the things that have impacted you. And in this module, we're going to ask you about what your healing journey looks like. You get to decide. What coping strategies have worked best for you so far? And it's important to keep in mind that you want a balance. You want a variety of skills, and you also want a balance of active and problem-solving skills, and also passive coping skills like distraction. So you can ask yourself, what do I do when my coping skills are not enough to sustain me and help me to heal? So that's what this module is all about. And one thing that is important to think about in my mind as a solution-oriented therapist is how have you managed to cope so far? What skills and strategies have helped you get through to the point where you are today? Because really the worst is over and you've survived whatever you went through. So if you know what has helped you in the past, it can help you in the future as well. And what will help you going forward? Which coping strategies do you want to get rid of or tweak or leave behind? I know a lot of people have compulsive habits that they develop when they've been traumatized or when they're extremely upset, like picking their nails or their skin or substance use or overeating. And so those are some of the skills that or coping strategies that you might want to think about replacing. So whether you have professional therapy for your traumatic history or not, you can always practice your coping skills and update and modify them as needed. And after all, the idea is that eventually you rely on yourself and your support network to cope with stress going forward. And I want to make something really clear. You're in charge of your healing process. A lot of times when I have clients, especially ones who come from backgrounds where their family and relationships are not well boundaried, their loved ones try to get involved, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Sometimes they're the impetus that gets their loved one into therapy, and they're supportive and kind and respectful, and sometimes not so much. So people probably try to get involved in your healing process out of concern for you. But it's important to set boundaries about how they do that and how much you allow them to get involved. Because sometimes they're just downright pushy and they might be involved in ways that you don't feel good about. So some of my clients have said that their spouses and family members tell them not to tell me all of what's going on with them emotionally, or I'll lock them up in a mental ward. And that's so rare. I think I've sent people to the hospital maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire 20 plus year career. It's very unusual for that to happen. But even if it does, it's not their business, and it shouldn't prevent you from getting treatment out of fear that something terrible like that is going to happen. Other times, loved ones will tell the client what to talk about in therapy. You need to address this. Oh, we tell the therapist you did blah, blah, blah. Um, Thinking that I'm somehow like this arbiter or Judge Judy, and I'm going to say, oh, your loved one was right. You should have listened to them. That it's none of their business what we talk about. It really isn't. Unless you're in couples therapy, what your spouse has to say about your therapy is irrelevant. It might be informative, it might be useful, but you don't have to do what they say just because they say you should address X, Y, or Z. And they think that they know what's best for you, but again, they're not in your shoes. They haven't walked in your moccasins, so to speak. So it's not really their place, and it's not really fair for them to try to dictate what happens in your therapy. And sometimes they notice something useful or insightful, and we can talk about it for sure. Sometimes I've even had spouses or partners or family members sit in on 1 or 2 sessions, but I only do that when it seems like A, the client is willing to do that, and B, it would really be helpful for them. Otherwise, it's your therapy. You get to decide who's there, and you get to decide how much people are involved. I've also had loved ones want to talk to me directly about the client behind their back and insult the client for being in therapy. Those are never okay. I can see sometimes if a person is having a delusional episode or they're not in contact with reality, that it might be helpful to tell me certain things. But for the most part, if you know where you are and you know what's going on, that's totally unnecessary for a person outside of our therapeutic relationship to contact me directly and talk about you without your knowledge. So again, you get to decide who you tell that you're being in therapy, what you tell them, and how involved you let them become. It's not their treatment, not their journey. So take a minute now and think about what kind of involvement you want or need from other people. Sometimes it's helpful to have someone that you can go, "Whoa, that was a big deal in therapy. We went over some hard stuff. Can I vent to you about it?" That can be nice. And it can be welcome and helpful to have someone who's interested and respectfully, willing to listen. What feels good for you and what feels intrusive or hurtful? So you might want to write down a little bit about that. And you can pause the recording if you like and do that now. But there will be an exercise like this in the workbook if you want to just go to that now. So I like these quotes about healing. Healing happens when you're triggered and you're able to move through the pain, the pattern, the story, and walk your way to a different ending. And trauma is hell on earth. Trauma resolved is a gift from the gods. So now you get to learn how to free yourself from your traumatic past. So I'm going to go over some general principles of healing from trauma, and then we'll get into specific therapies for trauma. Post-traumatic stress, as you know by now, affects your mind, body, and spirit. And while therapists need to correct faulty thinking and help you recognize it and address it, we also need to deal with you in your physical manifestations of traumatic stress and change the way you see yourself and the world. It's important to be active when you're healing from trauma. Move your body, engage with other people, even though you might feel like isolating. Um, and healthy exercise in balance with other activities is a good option to help with this. Even gardening can help you heal. Doing activities that feel life-sustaining and healthy, and redirecting yourself to be present in each moment can help you undo the way you experience traumatic memories. So, as we talked about in the last module, there's bottom-up strategies for dealing with trauma and top-down strategies. And this refers to the direction that the nervous system addresses traumatic stress. And so top down is directed towards your cerebral cortex, the part of your brain capable of complex thought. And by addressing how you think, it can change how you feel and behave. Bottom up treatment is starting with the lower parts of the brain and nervous system, especially the amygdala and other parts of the emotional brain or limbic system. And this helps with physical symptoms that come along with traumatic stress, and it also helps integrate emotions, body, and mind. So here's a nifty little picture of what we know about the brain so far. And we're always discovering new things about the brain, new facts and new ways that the brain works. But if you notice here, this is, well, this top part is the cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for judgment and self-control. And a lot of times that is kind of hijacked when you're really upset about something. Let's say you're triggered by something that reminds you of the traumatic incident. This part may not be available to you, and you may act from a more survival, emotional oriented part of the brain, the limbic system. And this part, as we remember, this is concerned with just basic survival functions like blood rate and body temperature, etc. So the bottom-up strategies we'll talk about are movement, like dance and yoga and theater, social engagement, using the voice, body-oriented therapies like somatic experiencing and Hakomi, and sensory motor therapies. Top-down strategies are cognitive processing therapy and CBT. Now, EMDR therapy is kind of a combination. It gets you in touch with how you're feeling and what you're thinking now about the trauma and where you feel it in your body. So that's kind of on the fringe. It's kind of bridging both clinical hypnosis. And then there are also mindfulness-based approaches to healing from trauma, including yoga, but also, reconnecting with the larger whole, mindfulness, meditation, being in nature, and healing ceremonies from maybe indigenous cultures. We won't talk about each single one of these because, like you probably know, there are tons, so many different types of trauma healing and trauma therapies that to cover them all, A, I don't know about all of them, and B, I covered the ones that I know something about. So I think the ones that I cover should be plenty. And it's also good to kind of think about the 3 stages of trauma recovery. Now, this is attributed to Judith Herman, a psychiatrist, but it's also, these stages have been attributed to Pierre Janet, who was a psychiatrist in the turn of the century. Anyway, so the 3 stages are: we need to establish stability and safety. And by this, we mean not only physical safety, like are you choosing to be alive? Are you out of the woods in terms of suicidal gestures or self-harm? And are you able to live without substances to dull your pain? And so that's the physical stability. Then there's also the emotional stability. Can you regulate your own feelings? Can you kind of be with yourself? Can you sit quietly sometimes? That can be hard, especially when your nervous system is really uh, out of whack with what happened to you. So you have to replace those self-destructive behaviors with healthy coping strategies and techniques. And in this stage, you learn better coping skills so you can deal with the strong emotions that usually come up from processing trauma. The next stage involves remembering and mourning. So you confront the traumatic event in a way that's manageable for you. And you may feel some emotional and physical discomfort from talking about or dealing with the trauma. But by now you've dealt with how to handle unpleasant emotions and sensations in this stage of treatment. And you grieve the sense of safety and normalcy that you had before the traumatic event. Sometimes when you're growing up in a really dysfunctional environment, you don't know any better and you think this is all there is. You think you may not even think it's normal, but you think this is just how families are. And then maybe you go to a friend's house or you see something on TV where a mother or a father is interacting with their child in a loving and respectful way. And then it hits you, oh my gosh, I didn't get that. I had the opposite of that. I had parents who just didn't care about me and actually were angry at me all the time and treated me horribly. And then it really starts to sit in where you go, oh my gosh, I needed that. I needed to be treated with care and respect. Depending on how severe and pervasive the trauma was, you may feel unsafe in the world and assume that nothing can ever be the same. So that's part of the trauma processing, is dealing with the grief of not getting your needs met. Or even if it was an acute trauma, let's say you were sexually assaulted at a party or you were mugged on your way home from work and you had an okay childhood, but still maybe dealing with the legal system and not having people believe you or treat you with kindness during that time. You may have to mourn that your expectations and your trust were betrayed. So the final stage involves restoring relationships with yourself and other people. You survive the trauma by disconnecting yourself from the parts of yourself that were victimized, as well as disconnecting from others. You may kind of keep to yourself and not trust people very easily. Eventually, you have to come home to yourself and your interconnectedness with others. And part of this involves learning how to trust wisely. You don't want to go from trusting nobody to trusting everybody because, frankly, not everyone is trustworthy, right? Not everyone has your best interests at heart. And so you have to learn how to trust wisely, how to use your critical thinking and both your emotional sense of a person and your intellect in combination to see, is this person worth getting to know, or should I trust my instinct and go, no, I don't think this person's right. And it involves looking at the red flags that the person shows you and going, no, that's not acceptable, or I'll think about giving this person another chance, but if they do this again, no, they're out. So, as I said, not everyone deserves your trust, and not everyone is out to get you either. So, it's important to reconnect with other people because you might have become really withdrawn from your traumatic experience. You might not realize how much it affected you. So at the same time, talking to other people might remind you of how strong you are and how you've grown and changed for the better from the trauma. And this is what we talked about as post-traumatic growth. So here are just some of the many, many, many different approaches to treating trauma. So many that it's hard to list. There's neurofeedback, which is more bottom up, clinical hypnosis, as I mentioned, cognitive processing therapy, which is kind of like a version of CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR therapy, which we'll talk about a little bit later, ego state therapy, brain spotting, trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, prolonged exposure, which is sort of an offshoot from CBT, narrative exposure therapy, reactive therapy, somatic experiencing, sensory motor therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. There's one I didn't put on here, internal family systems therapy, mindfulness-based therapies, and the list goes on and on and on. As Michael Yapko says, not everything works for everyone. And I'll focus on explaining the ones that I have training and experience in and have used the most. And before we get to that, I also want to acknowledge how frightening it can be if you've gone through, especially multiple traumas or developmental trauma that's like growing up, you couldn't rely on your caregivers to provide a safe and healing environment. So you need to connect with someone in order to heal, but I acknowledge that that's also scary. And whether you heal with the assistance of a therapist or psychiatrist or spiritual leader, you'll need to have a certain amount of trust and a willingness to suspend your beliefs about other people. And otherwise, you'll probably not allow yourself to connect with them, and you might kind of not really comply with your treatment plan. You might not do homework, or you might procrastinate on doing things to take care of yourself in therapy, or just even basic self-care. You might even sabotage the healing process. You might schedule things for when you know you have therapy, and it helps you feel safe in the short run, but then you're stuck under a dark cloud as long as you resist the help. And so it's natural to feel the stress after all these people have let you down or even betrayed you. But there are literally billions of people on the planet, each with their own personality, and no two people is alike. So there's a pretty good chance that not everyone will be like the person who hurt you. And it might be good to reflect here a moment on what makes a person trustworthy. what have you found so far is easier to get along with or easier to trust and harder to trust? What personal characteristics does a person exhibit when they are trustworthy? And what do you resonate with? Do you get along with people who kind of are blunt and tell it like it is? Or do you prefer a softer approach where people kind of choose their words carefully and have a gentle tone of voice and go at your pace? So this is a chance to kind of think about that, because let's face it, as long as you're alive and on this planet, you're going to have to interact with somebody, even if it's just the clerk at the supermarket when you get your food. And knowing when to trust people and when not to is an important life skill. Sometimes, if you've been in an abusive household for your whole life, you may never have learned how to trust people in an intelligent, purposeful way. So I encourage you to start doing that now. So now we get into probably the nicer part of the module. There are body-centered approaches to trauma treatment that are bottom up, as I described before. Two of the best known or better known ones are somatic experiencing and sensory motor therapy. I have a little bit of training in somatic experiencing, but none in sensory motor. But my understanding of these is that they involve awareness of your body and the way it feels when you're thinking about trauma and the trapped emotions that are inside as a result of having gone through trauma. So Dr. Peter Levine developed somatic experiencing, and the main goal is to change the way the body responds to trauma-related stress through bottom-up processing. Instead of focusing on thoughts and becoming aware of how they shape your experience, somatic experiencing focuses on feelings within the body, especially incomplete motions that would have protected you during the trauma but weren't possible at the time. So maybe pushing away or hitting or running, all of those are defensive movements that may not have been able to be completed. And anything that protects you from harm. So this therapy integrates awareness of the body into the therapeutic process. Pat Ogden, Dr. Pat Ogden developed sensory motor therapy, and it's a body-centered talk therapy that deals with your thoughts, emotions, and the physical symptoms of trauma-related disorders, using mindfulness and awareness of the connection between your body and mind to help you address PTSD, depression, anxiety, and it also deals with completion of unfulfilled responses to trauma, like trying to physically or ward off an attack or protect yourself from a physical attack. Symptoms that can result from this include shaking, trembling, perspiring, which allows you to remove the stuck energy in your nervous system and have more control over your body. You don't have to remember all the details of the trauma to have a positive effect in either of these therapies. There's also trauma-informed yoga, massage, Feldenkrais, the Rosen method body work, theater, dance, and other movement therapies. I especially like Qigong. There's a guy named Lee Holden on YouTube, and he has a lot of Qigong movements or exercises that can help with anxiety and other stress-related symptoms. So you might want to check him out. You've probably heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short. It's really well respected in the psychology and psychotherapy world. And the basic premise is that by changing the way you think and getting rid of faulty reasoning, you change how you feel and behave. And so maybe you blame yourself for a trauma, or you think that everything is dangerous or everyone is dangerous. CBT also helps with anxiety, stress, depression, insomnia, all of which are very common in people with PTSD. Some of the common thinking errors for people with traumatic stress are that they can't protect themselves. People can't be trusted. The world is too dangerous to live in. They're permanently damaged or broken. They should have done more. They're doomed to an unpleasant future because of what happened to them. Are they going to die sooner than other people? If any of these sounds familiar, then you know, okay, I'm not alone. This is pretty common for trauma survivors. So CBT challenges these assumptions and helps people test the reality of their thinking about the trauma. It also encourages people to be actively engaged in their lives and take charge of their time and their lives. So if you have a lot of irrational thought patterns that developed with PTSD or traumatic stress, it can be helpful with that. And one way to desensitize people with CBT is called prolonged exposure. So you go over the trauma until it feels like it's not really a big deal. You just kind of expend all your emotional energy and repeating it over and over and over. And so you tell the story of the traumatic incident, record it, and listen to it repeatedly until it no longer affects you emotionally. So I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound really pleasant. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It has been found to be helpful, but it also has been found to have a lot of dropouts. And when they tested this therapy, a lot of people were like, I'm not doing this. This hurts too much. So it's hard to do, and it may not be right for everyone. But if you feel like, hey, I want to be a Spartan, I want to go for it, then maybe it would work for you. EMDR therapy stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So Francine Shapiro, a psychologist in the 1980s, developed this. And the idea is that we have an adaptive information processing model. We have a way of dealing with stress and things that happen to us that works well. And sometimes when we have a traumatic incident, the information from that doesn't get stored the same way as regular information. So it might get stuck, and the information and the sensations that went along with the trauma. So this therapy helps you get unstuck from the painful events of your past by allowing the process to be, the experience to be fully processed. And this releases the negative self-concepts, body sensations, and emotions that have been trapped in your body since the traumatic event. So it's sort of like if you think about a computer, right? When a computer is running, the information gets stored all over the place. And you need to defrag your computer in order to bring all the pieces together and make it a cohesive whole. So that's sort of what EMDR therapy does. There are 8 phases to this therapy, starting with discussing what you need from therapy, understanding your history, your strengths and resources, and preparing for desensitization. So desensitization is a fancy way of saying, making it so that when you think about a memory, it doesn't feel like it just happened. It feels you're less sensitive to it. So you choose what memories to process, and you assess how they affected you emotionally, physically, and what you tell yourself about them. I always use the example of a dog bite. Let's say you were bitten by a dog when you were young, and ever since then, every time you see a dog, you freak out and you're afraid and you want to run away, even if the dog is friendly or much smaller or friendlier than what you originally encountered with the dog that bit you. So you are kind of globally reacting to dogs as if they're all threatening. So then what I would do if you were seeking EMDR therapy from me for the dog bite, I would ask you, what do you think about it right now? What is the worst aspect of it? You might say, oh, I was pinned up against a fence and there was no one around and I was so freaked out and it was lunging at me and I thought it was going to tear me apart. And so I'd ask you, okay, what are you feeling right now in this moment as you're thinking about, oh, I'm feeling so scared, heart's beating, I feel sweaty, my hands are clammy. And what are you thinking about yourself in this moment about this? Oh, I'm thinking I can't defend myself. I'm helpless. So then we put all that together and we rate on a scale of 0 to 10, how bad is it right now? Where 0 is neutral and 10 is the worst that could happen, the worst you could possibly feel. And you might go, oh, it's an 8. And then we come up with a positive thought that you would prefer to think about yourself and rate how strongly you believe in those statements. And then this is where it looks a little strange sometimes. So if you were in person, I would have you think about all those things, the emotional, physical, and cognitive assessment of that memory, as well as an image in your head. So maybe, you're thinking of this dog coming at you. And then we do bilateral stimulation. So if you were in person, I would have you follow my fingers going back and forth. And we would do that for a little while. And then I'd have you stop and take a deep breath and tell me what you experienced while that was going on. So this allows you to kind of have one foot in the future, one foot in the present and one foot in the past. The foot in the present is you are here with me. I'm in the room or in the virtual space with you. And one foot is in the past, meaning you're reliving a part of that memory. And so you notice the changes that happen as we're doing this. And at the end, you reevaluate how much the target affects you. So as your eyes are going back and forth or you're tapping your shoulders, you are reconsolidating the memory and you see the event usually from a more matured, empowered perspective. This is especially true if the trauma happened to you in childhood or adolescence when you weren't as powerful as you are now. So as I mentioned, you keep doing with this until you get to a 0, where you can think about the memory and you can abstractly acknowledge, yes, that was not a good thing to happen to a kid. And I'm sad that it happened to me, but I don't feel like I'm still there. I feel like I'm here now in an adult body and I have my resources and abilities with me now. So if someone tried to do that to me as an adult, I would know what to do and I could protect myself. So at the end, if you haven't, you don't always get through a traumatic memory in one session. Sometimes you're lucky and it all resolves lickety split, but quite often, especially with developmental trauma, it takes a while to get to a zero because it has a lot of different aspects of it. But so if you are not at a zero, and you feel like there's still stuff up, there's still emotions, there's still body sensations, then we get you to a calm state and assist you in putting whatever remnants from that day's processing into a safe imaginary container. And you might even imagine yourself in that situation that used to trigger you and use BLS to strengthen your ability to handle it better in the future. That's sort of like future processing. So each session, we evaluate how much progress you've made with neutralizing the memories. And it's always so exciting to hear when a person can do something that they used to avoid or interact with people that used to upset them. And it's like, oh, yeah, I saw her at the fair, whatever. I just walked past her. Or, yeah, I used to be afraid to, go swimming, but now I can do it and it feels good. So this doesn't take away the importance or the severity of the trauma you felt before, but the idea is you want to get to a point where you're free of that grip that it had on you emotionally before. And it helps your brain recognize the traumatic memory or reorganize the traumatic memory so you can feel neutral about it and see it from a more adult perspective. Then there's clinical hypnosis, and this is actually a well-established way of approaching trauma. Unfortunately, I think people associate it with stage hypnosis, where people make you do kind of strange things while you're in a hypnotic trance, but or with kind of past life regression and stuff that may not be um, kind of thought of as legitimate or real. But clinical hypnosis is a well-established trauma treatment. Excuse me. And what it does is help you achieve a focused, attentive state of consciousness that helps you achieve your mental health and physical goals without interference from your usual way of thinking. So the critical part of your brain, or the limited part of your brain, the part that says, no, that's not possible, or you're never going to go anywhere. So you allow that part to kind of become inactive and take a back seat or just go do whatever it wants to do. And you're focused on the healing that happens at a deeper level, at an unconscious or subconscious level. Sometimes a hypnotherapist will tell you what to do, and it sounds like a good idea in theory, but you might not be willing or able to put it into action in your life. So, so if you are able to bypass that thing that says, no, I can't do that, or yeah, I could do that, but then this would happen. You make excuses or justify sticking with the status quo. That can get in the way of healing. So something at a deeper level might also interfere with your efforts. Like maybe you internalized a message as a kid that you couldn't learn or that you weren't worthy of help. So hypnosis can expose these blockages and bypass negative self-talk so you can make better use of your helpful messages and be exposed to the traumatic event from your past in a safe, attenuated way so it doesn't feel as painful or scary. And it can also help foster new brain development to make you more resilient to stress. During the hypnosis, therapists might tell you stories or metaphors or anecdotes related to your issues. The therapist might also give you direct advice or ideas for better coping. And you can also learn skills like self-distancing, compartmentalization, which is a fancy word for kind of putting things apart from each other, and learning how to be more relaxed in the present also can help you heal from trauma. And there's solution-focused approaches to trauma. So instead of focusing a lot on the suffering that you've endured, solution-focused brief therapy focuses on how you've managed to survive and build a good life for yourself despite the suffering. So the key points are coping and adaptation. How is it that you've been able to get through this, even though you're really having a hard time? How is it that you're not doing worse than you are currently? And what's keeping you from going backwards instead of forwards? It's much more here and now oriented than other approaches like psychodynamic and cognitive behavioral. And it's also geared towards getting you to think about what's going well or better. How can you amplify and repeat that? How can you use that skill or that insight in different situations? What strengths are you using to do as well as you are? And so I think that this is a really good approach for building on resilience and post-traumatic growth, which we talked about in previous modules. And there's spiritual approaches to treatment as well. Like we talked about, trauma can disrupt your sense of peace and ease in the world. And you might have had a spiritual practice or belonged to a religion, but after you felt betrayed or after the traumatic incident, you don't trust God or you don't trust other people in the church or in your faith. Or your whatever your concept of a higher power is. You may have lost faith in humanity and wondered how God or your higher power could let something so awful happen to you or someone you care about. It's understandable to distrust after a traumatic event, but staying stuck in distrust kind of blocks you from potential support, love, and a sense of wonder and connection to everything else. You miss out on the beauty of life because you're so focused on how you have to guard yourself against being hurt again. And all these things I'm talking about are healthy and necessary for your well-being. This is not to say that you have to be religious to heal. But if it is something that's an important part of your psychology, then why not use it for your benefit? Here are some ways to reconnect with the world outside of the small sense of self. So meditation is very good, focusing on how you're connected to yourself physically and mentally, as well as to everything around you. You're part of nature, other people, animals. One way to do this is, if you're sitting somewhere peaceful, to repeat to yourself on each in-breath and out-breath, I am part of the whole, or all one. And then when you stray from that, because you will, Mind is shameless, as Jack Kornfield says. You just bring your attention back to that idea or that phrase, all one. If you do have a religious teacher or spiritual leader that you trust, talk to them about some of your concerns spiritually and what happened to you. If the teacher's open to discussing your shaken faith and doubts, it might feel healing for them to hear you out and to advise you. They may have some ideas on how to gradually reconnect with your spiritual community. You might read up on different spiritual traditions and how they view misfortune and tragedies. Maybe you find Bible stories helpful or other religious texts like the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran. You can see how other people have understood and borne the joys and sorrows of existence. Similar to exploring your post-traumatic growth, you can look for the meaning in what you've gone through. What does your suffering mean to you? What have you learned from it? And what have you learned about yourself after having survived it? Is there a reason for suffering at all? Does it have any spiritual value? One Indian guru said, "I love suffering because it brings me closer to God." And as we said before, that's a pretty radical statement. Yet, if you find that you're more compassionate and aware of others' suffering because of it, it may have had some kind of silver lining. So now we get to kind of think about putting all of this together, all the things you've learned about. Are the traumatic incidents that you faced from childhood, adolescence, or adulthood, or all the above, are they bearable? What bothers you the most about them? And what bothers you most about your traumatic stress? What are the coping skills you need to start using in order to feel better in the long run? And are there things that you've done in the past to try to cope with the traumatic stress that no longer work for you? What's the first thing you need to do to start feeling better? And then what comes after that? And then what? So if you have been someone who has really relied heavily on substances, like street drugs or prescription medication, and I don't mean like Zoloft or Prozac, I mean sedatives and hypnotics, things like benzodiazepines, like Ativan. If you're taking prescription medication outside of the way it's been prescribed, and you're taking it just because you don't want to feel at all, then it might be good for you to, before you attempt working on the trauma, to get sober first. Get into a treatment program that helps you deal with your substance use. Because alcohol and other drugs, while they might feel good in the moment, they take you away from whatever you're bothered by. In the long run, they create their own problems and their own sickness. So if you're in that situation, I really encourage you to seek help for your substance use. And once you do that, then you have the security and stability and safety to do this harder work, this deeper work about the trauma. You need to be able to tolerate strong emotions and sitting with them and being with them and being exposed to them. Some treatments, like we said, like the sensory motor and the somatic experiencing, don't depend on that as much. but it's still a very good idea if you're abusing substances to get treatment for that first. So think about the coping skills that you have already and the ones that you've learned. Are those enough to help you heal completely, or enough for you to feel like, okay, I got this? It's okay to get therapy for a while, and then you get up to a point where you hit a plateau, you're not really getting better, you're not getting worse, you're just cruising along, and then you go, okay, I'm going to put a pause on therapy for now and just do life. And then maybe something comes along and makes you realize, oh, there's another layer of healing that I need to accomplish. It's perfectly fine to come and go in and out of therapy. For some people, it's a one and done and they're good. For other people, I would say for most people, you might need support and different kinds of support at different points of your life. So if you were doing okay and then you decided, I want to do therapy again, good for you. Really, you are making the most mature choice that you can to say, I need to up my skills, I need to get more support until I feel solid again. So other people might go, oh, you're going back to therapy? What's wrong with you? Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. Usually, those people who criticize you for going to therapy are afraid to themselves. So just remember that. So think about what additional support you may need from other people and who's going to be in your support network. Which of your friends are supportive, or your family members, your community, spiritual leaders or teachers, doctors or other medical professionals. And maybe at this point, individual, couple, or couple therapy or in family therapy might be a good choice for you. So we've already talked about what are the things that help you decide that. And you can further contemplate that and maybe talk to a trusted other person. Hey, do you think this would help me? And so this is the way you build your cookbook for your mind, body, and your mind, body, and spirit dealing with traumatic stress. So far, as you've been listening to this, what types of treatments sound like they would be best for you? With what you know now, what elements of the coping skills and treatment modalities sound most helpful and appealing? So here are the steps that I've tried to guide you through in this program. First, to inform yourself about trauma so you don't feel like you're losing your mind or you're the only one on earth who's going through what you're going through. Developing resources for tolerating strong feelings that arise when dealing with trauma. Confronting what happened to you in a safe, nurturing environment with people you can trust. Developing a new meaning and understanding of yourself and the situation. Learning how the traumatic event has made you more resilient and stronger. And choosing what results of the trauma you want to keep and what you want to discard, and reconnecting with the world around you and with yourself. So I'd really love to know what's next for you. What do you decide you want to do? So this is our last guided meditations. You heard about lots of different treatment options, and those, as I said, aren't even all the ways you can get trauma therapy. So take some time to reflect which ones are most helpful and for your particular needs. Maybe there are some that feel more natural and appealing, while others sound like, no, that doesn't feel like me. The good news is you can pick and choose what feels best. I've tried a number of different approaches for my personal healing and growth, and sometimes one technique or therapist works for a while, and then I move on to something else, and that's perfectly fine. You can listen to your intuition and your inner knowing and find what suits your needs at this time. So, as we do our fourth and final guided meditation, we'll put all the pieces together for you. What have you learned? What have you discovered about yourself, your past, your strengths and challenges? So find your comfortable private spot where you won't be disturbed. Get situated with water and facial tissue and something to write with, and let's begin. By now, you're probably very adept at learning how to go within, to concentrate your attention on your internal experience. So much so that you might notice how much more easy it is to get centered and comfortable, gently turning your attention within to let the outside noises and distractions become distant, less prominent, to just experience the softening of your muscles in your body, and to allow yourself to experience comfort, easily focusing your attention within. And I'd like to guide you on a little journey to a special place inside of you, so you can leave your thinking mind behind to go on having whatever thoughts it's going to have anyway, and journeying into a deeper side of yourself, a deeper part, a part that's filled with the archive of your memories, images, sensations. And in order to access this part, you're going to take a little trip down the staircase to that profound richness inside. A place of your own creation, your own design. And as I count from 10 down to 1, you may feel changes happening. Changes that tell you you're going to a hidden part within yourself, one that's unfathomable, subterranean, one where you can really get acquainted with your inner resources. Beginning at the top of the stairs, 10, you may start to feel heavier or lighter. Going down to 9, allowing your breath to continue deepening and lengthening. 8, leaving all thoughts and concerns from everyday life further and further in the distance. 7, noticing changes in what you experience physically. Maybe a gentle numbness or greater sensitivity, cooler or warmer, whatever would feel right for you. 6, letting go of unnecessary muscle tension, just breathing it out. That's right. 5, and you can wonder whether your right hand feels cooler than your left hand, or your feet feel heavier than the back of your head. 4, everything you do during the day, you can admire how you operate in this world. 3, really getting settled and comfortable within. Too comfortable to want to move or do anything, but sit there or lie there, one step at a time, till you reach the destination at the bottom of the stairs. And when you look around, I wonder what you see there in that deep space within. I invite you to explore a room that's just in front of you. As you turn the knob and open the door to this special room, you can look around and notice all the different healing elements in that room. Looking around, taking a few steps in, and seeing whatever can help you heal from the negative things that have happened to you. Noticing things like the quality of light in the room, whether there are other people there, who they are. Is there furniture in the room? Comfortable places to sit or lie? Are there shelves with books or other items that can help you explore your strengths and your resources? You can notice what color the walls are and whether there are window coverings. And what do you see through the windows? As you look around at the walls, is there artwork hanging there? Or maybe messages to you? Messages that give you comfort, soothing, hope, and faith in a better tomorrow. And maybe there aren't clear images of the healing potential in that room. Maybe you hear kind words that are being spoken, messages that are meant just for you, just for what you've endured, an encouragement for what you've managed to accomplish despite your ordeals. Notice the sound of the voice that you hear, the quality and the emotion behind it, how it reverberates within you. Is it the voice of someone you love or know? Could it be your own voice from the present or future? Or maybe it's a voice from your imagination, how you wish someone would have talked to you in your time of need. What is it saying to you? Is it acknowledging your suffering in the past? Is it helping you remember it from a different perspective, a more mature stance? Maybe it's assuring you that the worst is over, that you survived miraculously, bravely, wholeheartedly, that better things are on the way. I really don't know what the voice might be saying to you and how you're taking it in word by word, note by note. Maybe it's a song, the song of your heart. And can you just open your heart and let the music flow in? No need to keep it out, because you deserve kindness and compassion. You deserve to have these words comfort you, hold you tenderly, with care and love everlasting. The sweetest music there is. Maybe in this healing room, you sense a presence. Could it be a wiser, older version of yourself? Or maybe it's a wise being, a pet or animal, or a human, or a spiritual figure. You get to decide what this presence might be and what it's like to be in its presence. Maybe it feels empowering and gives you a sense of strength, inner wisdom. Or perhaps it's very nurturing and it cradles you in its arms like an infant. Maybe it's a friend who holds your hand and journeys alongside you, filling you with confidence and a sense of adventure for the future. You really can create your own companion here, as you have in the past. So the past doesn't hurt you anymore because you're not alone. And maybe you can borrow some of the qualities from this other being strength, wisdom, courage, things that are actually already inside of you. You just don't know all the wonderful treasures within. And any and all sounds that you hear in the background can just help you remain comfortably absorbed within. I'm going to give you a minute of clock time just to notice what you're making of my words, words that you may accept or keep at bay, because ultimately you get to decide what you take in. During that minute of silence, you can sift and sort through what I've said. And when I speak again, my voice can help you go even deeper within and maintain this deep level of comfort and focus inside. And that minute starts now. During that time, you've had a chance to really create a rich inner space in which to heal. You might notice that some of what you're learning might come to mind as possible resources for your healing journey. It's also possible that your imagination, your unconscious mind, did all the work for you. Isn't it nice to know that you can continue creating this inner healing whenever you listen to this recording and beyond? That you've created a healing space just for you with the things and people and presences that will help you feel more connected to the present, calmer, and more settled about the past, and more hopeful about the future and what's possible for you. Anytime you want or need to take a healing break, you can always come back to this healing space within. Revisit it, embellish it, really make it your own. It might change over time according to your needs, but it's always, always there for you. A place for you to be yourself without any trying or pretending. And as your deep, creative unconscious mind puts the finishing touches on this experience, we can bring it to a comfortable close. You may start to move around, wiggle your toes or your fingers, bringing blood back into those areas, becoming more consciously aware of your surroundings, alert, refreshed, and fully consciously aware. If you haven't already, please open your eyes and come back into the room, fully presently alert and conscious now.